You have seen 3 steps in aerobic respiration. Among those 3 steps, 3 very interesting NEET questions can be asked. First question is, in which of the following step neither oxygen is used nor CO2 is released? Which is the step? That is first step, glycolysis, where neither oxygen is used nor CO2 is released. And another NEET question, in which of the following step only CO2 is released but oxygen is not used? That is Krebs cycle. In Krebs cycle, when one pyruvic acid enters into Krebs cycle, 3 CO2 molecules are released. As we are having 2 pyruvic acids, 6 CO2 can be released. Only CO2 are released, but no oxygen is used. So that for the second question, in which of the following step only CO2 is released but not oxygen is used? And the third question is, in which of the following step oxygen is used but CO2 is not released? That is terminal oxidation, where oxygen is used, that too in final step, but no CO2 is released. CO2 are released only in Krebs cycle. That's all. There are 3 questions. A step where neither O2 is used nor CO2 is released, glycolysis. The step where only CO2 is released but oxygen is not used, Krebs cycle. The step where only oxygen is used but CO2 is not released, that is terminal oxidation. And now let us go to anaerobic respiration. The name itself indicates the respiration in the absence of oxygen. In anaerobic respiration, we do have 2 types of anaerobic respiration. One is lactic acid fermentation, another one is alcoholic fermentation. One more thing, they may ask whether it is aerobic respiration or anaerobic respiration, the first step, glycolysis, is one and the same in both the cases. Glycolysis, it is taking place in cell cytoplasm. So that is the first step for aerobic respiration also, is concerned to aerobic respiration, and even the cytokinesis, that glycolysis is connected to anaerobic respiration, where also it is a first step. Once in NEET the question was asked, which of the following step is common for aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration? That step is none other than glycolysis. Now let us see anaerobic respiration. In that anaerobic respiration, we do have alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. First, anaerobic respiration, in which let us see about alcoholic fermentation. Give an example for anaerobic respiration, that is alcoholic fermentation only. How this alcoholic fermentation takes place? Alcoholic fermentation is a type of anaerobic respiration where respiration takes place in the absence of oxygen. Even in alcoholic fermentation, the first step, glycolysis, is there. You are knowing glycolysis in aerobic respiration. See here, glucose gives 2 molecules of pyruvic acids and 2 NADH2 and 2 ATPs, totally 8 ATPs. This is the equation for glycolysis. And these 2 molecules of pyruvic acids, they undergo decarboxylation. This CO2 will go off in both the pyruvic acid molecules, so that this H comes over here, so that this is 2CS3 CHO 2CO2 eliminated. And these 2 molecules are acetaldehyde. And these 2 acetaldehyde get reduced by NADH2. So that in each acetaldehyde, 2 hydrogen will enter, one H here, that is CH2, another H after OH, so that 2 CS3, CH2, OH and 2 NAD. Hence the formation of ethyl alcohol. It is anaerobic respiration. The type is alcoholic fermentation. If you would like to make it sum up, 2 pyruvic acids get cancelled, 2 NADH2 get cancelled, 2 acetaldehyde get cancelled. The remaining is C6H12O6, this is glucose, giving 2 molecules of ethyl alcohol, and 2 molecules of CO2 are eliminated, and 2 NAD+. This is the equation for anaerobic respiration, and here 2 ATPs. See, in aerobic respiration, from 1 glucose, 36 ATPs are formed. But in anaerobic respiration, the first step is as it is. But in alcoholic fermentation, we can see from 1 glucose, 2 molecules of ethyl alcohol and 2 molecules of CO2 are formed. The net gain of energy is just 2 ATPs. The net gain of energy is just 2 ATPs. That's all. Net gain of energy in anaerobic respiration, whether it is alcoholic fermentation or lactic acid fermentation, net gain of energy just 2 ATPs. The net gain of energy in aerobic respiration is 36 ATPs. 36 ATPs. And this alcoholic fermentation takes place in yeast and bacteria, even in bacteria, alcoholic fermentation. Bacteria, they are anaerobes. As they are prokaryotes, no mitochondria at all. So that this glycolysis takes place in their cell cytoplasm and alcoholic fermentation. But yeast is a fungi having mitochondria. Is having mitochondria. If oxygen is available, it respires aerobically. If oxygen is not available, they respire anaerobically. And they may ask a NEET question, which of the following organism respires both aerobically and anaerobically? The answer is yeast. Because it's a eukaryote, mitochondria is present. In case the oxygen is available, they respire aerobically, giving 36 ATPs. If no oxygen, Even though mitochondria are there, but they respire anaerobically, giving 2 ATPs. This is a type of anaerobic respiration. One type of anaerobic respiration, that is alcoholic fermentation. And let us go to lactic acid fermentation. Another type of anaerobic respiration is lactic acid fermentation. It is also anaerobic respiration and is taking place in striated muscles of man. They are voluntary muscles. They are present in our arms and legs. In case, if they get oxygen, they respire aerobically. In case they do not get oxygen, they respire anaerobically by performing lactic acid fermentation. Even for lactic acid fermentation, the first step, glycolysis, is one and the same. Glucose gives 2 molecules of pyruvic acids, 2 NADH2 and 2 ATP. But in next step, those 2 pyruvic acids reduced by 2 NADH2, leading to the formation of 2 molecules of lactic acid. CH3, CH, OH, COOH. If you summarize the equation, two pyruvic acids, 2 NADH2, 2 NADH2, and now C6, H12, O6, giving 2 molecules of lactic acid, 2 NAD and 2 ATPs. Whether it is alcoholic fermentation or lactic acid fermentation, net gain of energy is 2 ATP only. It means in anaerobic respiration, net gain of energy is 2 ATPs. And is taking place like this. From glucose, 2 molecules of lactic acid are formed. And they will be formed in our striated muscles. Remember, if the respiration takes place anaerobically by our muscles, so that lactic acid fermentation takes place, hence that lactic acid start accumulating in the muscles, so that we feel fatigue, tiredness. The tiredness is due to the accumulation of lactic acid in our striated muscles. And it happens only when the muscles respire anaerobically. Now, even though lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation are 2 anaerobic respirations, but we do find the major difference. They would ask one NEET question: in which of the following anaerobic respiration CO2 is not released? See, in this lactic acid fermentation, CO2 is not released. Directly, pyruvic acid becomes lactic acid by using NADH2. But in alcoholic fermentation, pyruvic acid become ethyl alcohol, but CO2 is released. So there are 2 NEET questions here. In which of anaerobic respiration CO2 is not released? That is lactic acid fermentation. And another question: in which of the following anaerobic respiration CO2 is released? That is alcoholic fermentation. Alcoholic fermentation. And is taking place in our striated muscles. That's what, Anulom Vilom, a pranayama, is very useful and is very scientific. By Anuloma Viloma, we will take very deep breathe so that maximum of oxygen is inhaled and all the muscles in the body will get oxygen supply. As oxygen is supplied in each and every cell, aerobic respiration, from 1 glucose 36 ATPs will form. If the insufficient supply of oxygen to our muscles, they start respiring anaerobically. From same glucose, they will yield just 2 ATPs of energy. That's all. In biological system, carbohydrate is a main energy yielder. Whatever the carbohydrate which we take, that is digested and the end product will be glucose, that enters into each and every cell through the blood, and where is a energy yielder. From that glucose we are getting the energy in the form of ATPs. Remember, even fat is also energy yielder. Even protein can also yield energy. But the steps are little different, but they are connected to the steps of carbohydrate steps. See here, in the short form I have written carbohydrate, in which main one is glucose. In glycolysis you are knowing the steps: glucose 6-phosphate, fructose 1,6-biphosphate. I have written only few steps of glycolysis. And fructose 1,6-biphosphate splits to form dihydroxyacetone phosphate, DHAP, and its isomer 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde, PCALD, that you have noticed. And from this 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde, pyruvic acid is formed. And once it goes to matrix, where Krebs cycle takes place, acetyl coenzyme A is formed. And this acetyl coenzyme A in matrix enters into Krebs cycle, where NADH2, FADH2 and GTPs are formed. That you know about. In case the fat acts as a energy yielder, that fat is made up of the monomers fatty acid and glycerol. What this glycerol does is directly it enters into respiratory pathway by converting into dihydroxyacetone phosphate. By converting into dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Then this dihydroxyacetone phosphate becomes 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde, that becomes pyruvic acid, and pyruvic acid becomes acetyl coenzyme A, and it enters into Krebs cycle. The entry of fat, one of the monomers, in this way. And another monomer of fat is a fatty acid. What this fatty acid does is, it is converted into acetyl coenzyme A and enters into Krebs cycle. Enters into Krebs cycle. And here we do expect energy yielding in the form of NADH2, FADH2 and GTP. And what is the fate of protein? It is made up of amino acids, and these amino acids by deamination are converted into pyruvic acid and enters into respiratory cycle. And pyruvic acid becomes acetyl coenzyme A. Acetyl coenzyme A enters into Krebs cycle, hence the release of energy. It means not only carbohydrates. No doubt carbohydrate is a main energy yielder in biological system. Even fat can also involve. And the interesting thing, is among fat, carbohydrate and protein, fat is a high energy yielder because it is having two monomers, fatty acid and glycerol. Both of them enter into Krebs cycle, so that yield is absolutely maximum. The yield is absolutely maximum. And in addition to this, we have said respiration is a catabolic process where glucose is splitted into CO2 and water, releasing energy. But even the respiration takes part in the generation of some organic products. How? In that respiratory cycle, these are the steps involved. In the respiratory pathway, these are the steps involved. But if we are in need of glycerol, what happens? A dihydroxyacetone phosphate in the respiratory pathway is converted into glycerol. Glycerol is formed from what? One of the intermediate product of respiratory pathway. If we are in need of, our body is in need of fatty acid, what happens? The acetyl coenzyme A, which is formed in respiratory pathway, is involved in the formation of fatty acid. Yes, there is a generation of another organic compound in respiration. In case our body needs the formation of amino acids, what happens? A compound in respiratory cycle, that is pyruvic acid, is converted into amino acid. That's what, instead of saying respiration is a catabolic process, we used to say is amphibolic process. Amphibolic process, because here it is both anabolic and catabolic. Catabolic is glucose gives energy splitted into CO2 and water. Anabolic means the compounds, intermediate compounds formed in respiratory pathway are involved in the generation of other products. Glycerol is formed from dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Fatty acid is formed from acetyl coenzyme A, and amino acids are formed from pyruvic acid. Once amino acids are formed, they become protein. Once fatty acid and glycerol are formed, they form fat. That's why it is said to be amphibolic process. One more concept remained in respiration is respiratory quotient. What is respiratory quotient? The definition tells respiratory quotient is the ratio of the amount of CO2 released to the amount of O2 consumed during aerobic respiration. That is the definition for RQ, respiratory quotient, is the ratio of amount of CO2 released to the amount of O2 consumed during aerobic respiration. Take for example C6H12O6. For this, 6 molecules of O2 are necessary so that 6 molecules of CO2 and 6 molecules of water are formed. Then how much CO2 is released in carbohydrate? 6 molecules of CO2 are released. How much of oxygen consumed? 6 O2. 6 by 6. Yes. Unity. Remember, respiratory quotient for carbohydrate is unity. Why it is unity? The number of CO2 released is equal to the number of O2 consumed. Means amount of CO2 released to the amount of O2 consumed. 6 molecules CO2 released, 6 molecules of O2 are consumed. Unity. What is the RQ of carbohydrate, they would ask. That is 1. In the similar way, RQ of fat, you should remember, is 0.7, and RQ of proteins is 0.9, and RQ of organic acids is more than 1. These you must remember. RQ of carbohydrate is 1, unity, because the amount of CO2 released is equal to the amount of CO2 consumed. For fat, is less than 1. For fat and protein, less than 1. Because 0.7. What it indicates? O2 is more consumed, or oxygen, CO2 is among them, which is more. For fat and proteins, the amount of O2 consumed is more than the CO2 released. And for organic acids, it is more than 1. It means the amount of CO2 released is more than the amount of O2 consumed. Instead of asking directly, what is the RQ of carbohydrate? 1. What is the RQ of fat? 0.7. RQ of proteins? 0.9. Even RQ of organic acids more than 1. They may ask in other way. For carbohydrate, the amount of CO2 released is equal to, is not equal to, is more than. They can ask like that. Here it is equal. For fat, the amount of CO2 released is lesser than O2 consumed. For this, as 0.9 is there, the amount of CO2 released is lesser than O2 consumed. For organic acids, the amount of CO2 released is more than the O2 consumed. That's all. Instead of asking direct values, they can ask like this also. Okay? It's about respiration.